My wife just stabbed herself. There's no pulse. There's blood all over the place.
Kyle Long called 911 twice to report his wife's suicide, but after weeks of unraveling the details, he is now the prime suspect for her murder. Today on Criminal Motives, we dive deep into the case of Kyle and Rachel Long. I'm Matthew Pfeiffer, a therapist who explores the behaviors behind high-profile true crime cases. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let's get this episode started.
Long and Kyle Long. They were married back in 2015. They had 2 children together. Rachel groomed dogs for a living and even owned her own dog grooming business. From the outside looking in, she had a picture-perfect life. But sadly, Rachel's life ended on October 23rd, 2025. Rachel and her husband lived in London, Ohio, a small city outside of the state's capital, Columbus. That day in October 2025, Kyle Long called 911 from his and Rachel's home and made a strange claim.
Madison County 911, where's your emergency?
My wife just stabbed herself. There's no pulse. There's blood all over the place.
Now, this is not the type of call dispatchers usually get, that someone has stabbed themselves. The call continues.
What's your name?
Kyle Long.
Okay, Kyle.
I'm trying to see.
Kyle, take a deep breath for me, okay? We're going to get help started. How old is your wife?
She's 32. She's numerous times where she kept going and doing it.
Okay, where did she stab herself?
In the closet and then out into the bathroom.
No, I mean, where on her body?
In her neck. She took a big knife with it.
Do you know where the knife is?
Yeah, it's still in her neck.
Okay, don't touch it, okay? Okay, take a deep breath for me, okay? I don't want you
Others are going to be coming on the bus, and I need somebody to pick them up.
Okay, is there anyone
So
else
immediately there are a lot of red flags already. So, so I want to give a quick disclaimer, trigger warning for suicidal ideations. I'm going to talk about suicide. I'm also going to talk about domestic violence here today. For those of you, if you are in a domestic violence, we take domestic violence here on this channel very, very seriously. And if you are in a situation that you need to get out of, it's important that you get the help that you need. This is the reason why I partnered with BetterHelp. If you go into the links in the description box or into the show notes down below, you can connect with a BetterHelp therapist and get 15% off your first month of therapy. There are links there. You can connect with a licensed therapist. And the best part about it is that you can do it from the comfort and convenience of your home. You can do it on your lunch break, so you can do it outside of the realm of people if you can't necessarily get away to go to see an actual therapist. And I gave that disclaimer, and I also gave you my partner intentionally because one of the things that I believe that happened here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further in this episode, is that one of the most dangerous points of when someone's leaving a domestic violence situation is when they tell that person to leave, that they're leaving. And that often can escalate the violence because that person, domestic violence typically, for the most part, happens because that person wants to keep a level of control. And when they realize that they're losing or have lost that control, things can get worse. I'm not discouraging people from leaving, but it is important for you to know that, and it's also important for you to get the help that you need. And I say that to say that there's some red flags in this 911 call. Number one, it's not beyond possibility that someone commits suicide via stabbing themselves, but to do it multiple times, And so there's that. Also, typically, if someone were going to do that, any type of suicide, usually people want to do it kind of quick and painless. They're not going to sit there and stab themselves multiple times and then leave the knife in their neck. And with the let's just call it the final blow. So there's some immediate red flags, and this I would say is even more so true when it's a woman. Typically, right? And again, I'm being very general, but I'm just going by the numbers and by statistics. I'm not, I don't mean to generalize people or genders or anything like that. But typically, if there were going to be a suicide with a woman who were going to harm herself, if they did cut themselves, it's typically going to be on the wrist. And if but more often than not, it's going to be via poisoning themselves, right? Sleeping pills, something like that, something where they can kind of go to sleep and just not wake up. And again, I apologize for being so graphic in terms of suicidal thoughts and things like that. But, in this breakdown, it's important to know these type of things because when officers arrive in this and through this 911 call, you're going to hear a lot of themes of she did this to herself. He's going to try to play innocent. You can even extend that to playing victim, so to speak. But this type of knowledge is common knowledge to people who are in this. And some of this is just common sense, but what I want you to listen to is how in his mind he actually rationalizes this, right? In his mind, he thinks that these lies, allegedly lies, right? He still has to go through the court process, but he thinks that these stories actually make sense, which leads me to believe that this is something that was not necessarily planned, but was kind of in the heat of the moment, right? Something was said, there was an argument, something came up, something was found, and this person allegedly, boom, lost their mind, right? And committed this act. But let's continue.
With you.
No, it's just I was working and I heard her, and I went in there to grab her and everything just...
Okay, when are your children going to be home?
Around 4:30 or a little bit after.
Okay. Where is your wife in the home, sir?
She's right by the toilet on the floor, puddle of blood.
Okay, she's in the bathroom?
Yeah.
Okay. Does she have a pulse, and is she breathing? Sir? Can you check for a pulse?
I don't feel a pulse.
Now, this 911 call is absolutely horrific. Kyle Long, as you can hear, is telling the 911 dispatcher that Rachel has stabbed herself repeatedly in the neck and their children. In about 20 minutes, the children will be getting off the school bus.
Are you willing and able to attempt CPR? I can give you instructions.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna
Are you willing to attempt CPR? Hold on. Are you willing to attempt CPR? Hold on. Now, if you listen to this between this moment and the moment where I paused before, where it seems like he's concerned with everything else with the exception of the most important thing. His wife potentially passing away, being stabbed, allegedly stabbing herself. The care of her, not knowing if she has a pulse, more concerned with his kids arriving there, more concerned, if I'm being honest with you, with being with the site and with now everyone would be concerned with their kids seeing something like this. However, not at the expense of the person's care and the person's life, right? And so it seems like he is just so distracted with everything else, right? Not giving her CPR, not knowing if she has a pulse, not knowing, not rendering aid, not doing anything, right? And being more concerned with the kids. Who can I call? You're going to hear him say in a few minutes multiple times, who can I call to come pick up my kids? Who can I do this to come pick up my kids? And for those of you who follow me for a while, actually in a few recent episodes, I talked about how people in these type of dynamics use children as a defense mechanism. Well, what about the kids? I got to get the kids and I got to do this. And I was sleeping with the kids. And so it wasn't possible for me to, they use their children as an alibi. So you're going to hear a lot of these type of themes in this situation as well. Let's continue.
Okay. Okay, can you put me on speakerphone, sir, and I'll give you instructions.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm trying to turn her over. She's not. The light fell out. I don't know.
That's okay. Do you have anything to put on the wound that's in her neck?
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay, it's okay. Are you still there, Kyle?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not getting anything from her.
Okay. Can you put me on speakerphone? It might be a little easier to hear each other.
Yeah, you're on speaker right now. I can't get anything from her. Can I call my dad or something or someone to come to the girls before they come in?
Okay. Do you have anything that you can put on the wound in her neck?
I tried to put.
Can you fold up some towels and put on it and be able to hold pressure?
Yeah, it's right there. I don't know. She just started running, like she did it, and then she just kept doing it and running into the bathroom and just nonstop, like repetitive.
That's okay. That's okay. Where is the knife now?
It's on the floor.
Okay. Is it within reach of her?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you take your foot and kick it to the side so it's outside of her reach?
Yeah, it's outside of her reach.
Okay. Okay. Are you going to attempt CPR or no?
Hold on.
Okay.
Can somebody call my, because my kids are going to.
This is now the second time that the operator has asked him to do CPR, and he said, hold on. And one of the reasons, and this is, and when this goes to court, I'm sure this is going to come up because you're going to hear them talk about this here in a second. This is actually his second time calling 911, right? So he called 911, he hung up, he called 911 again 4 minutes later, right? Then the operator asks him several times to render CPR, and 2 times he puts her on hold, right? This doesn't come across as a person that's actually concerned with this person's life, right? Sounds like a person, and with all this wrestling around, so let's kind of put this into perspective. With all the wrestling around and placing on hold, what else are you doing? Right? If you're not doing CPR, if you're not rendering aid, if you're not caring for your wife in this moment, what are you doing? What was all this wrestling around? What was the 4 minutes in between between the 2 calls all about? What was there was long gaps in between conversations between him and the operator. What was happening then and there? What was going on between those moments? Right. And so there's going to be lots and lots of questions about those gaps in time. Right. Because even though we're talking about minutes and seconds and some some instances. Those are, when you add them all together, they are long periods of time, right? That all add up, especially when you have someone that is that's literally dying, right? And then you add on top of that someone who is overly concerned with everything else, right? Your daughter's coming home, and who can he call? He was literally going to hang up with 911 to call his dad. So let's continue.
I'll be here in 20 minutes, and I don't want them to do anything.
That's okay. Who can we call for you?
My father.
Now, one thing that seems notable here is that Kyle Long still hasn't attempted CPR. He could be in shock, and maybe he just doesn't know what to do.
Do you feel like you're able to attempt CPR?
Let me try. Hold on.
Okay.
3 times.
Okay.
So much blood. I don't know.
That's okay. Okay, Kyle, take a deep breath, okay? We're getting help to you. It's okay. Are you still in the bathroom with her?
Yes, I'm still right here.
Okay. Is she moving at all?
No, her eyes are open.
Okay.
No pulse.
Kyle?
Hold on.
Okay.
All right, EMS is here.
EMTs were not able to save Rachel Long. She had already passed away by the time they arrived. And the scene that they found, it was gruesome, incredibly gruesome. And again, the claim by Kyle Long was incredibly strange. It's not impossible that a person would stab themselves, but it's certainly not something that EMTs would see very often. A probable cause affidavit states, according to Kyle, his wife Rachel came home from work, and after a short time being home, she went into the master bathroom while he was in the master bedroom working at his desk. Kyle stated that he heard what he thought was laughing, followed by screaming, and when he looked into the bathroom area, he saw Rachel Long stabbing herself several times in the face and neck area. It was determined that Kyle Long and Rachel Long were home alone at the time of the incident. The affidavit goes on to describe what the EMTs and detectives found when they arrived. Rachel was located in the master bathroom near the toilet with several injuries consistent with being stabbed with a knife on her face and neck. There were also visible injuries consistent with knife cuts on her hands. Rachel's clothes were saturated with blood, along with a large amount of blood pooling around her. A knife was located on the right side of the toilet, along with several pieces of paper towels or toilet paper found in the pooling blood next to the knife. The body was photographed and placed into a bag and sealed for transport to the Montgomery County morgue. Kyle Long was taken to the sheriff's office. Of course, detectives wanted to speak with him about what happened, and they say that it was at this time that Kyle told them that Rachel wanted a separation, and then the autopsy was conducted.
So of all the things that Kyle is allegedly not being truthful about, Rachel saying that she wants a separation is probably the one thing that he's actually being honest about. I think that's probably going to end up being the motive. I believe that that's probably what set him off. And I believe that through trial, I would not be surprised. We're going to hear from Rachel's friend here in a bit, or at least a statement from her friend. I believe that there's going to be people testifying to Kyle's abusive behavior throughout the relationship. People encouraging her to leave, people encouraging her to, to get help. Maybe they've gone through a separation in the past. Who knows if there's been any type of infidelity on either part. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's the one thing that he's being honest about. A lot of times people think that people who are lying and manipulative are lying about everything, and then that's not beyond the possibility. But oftentimes what makes people who are manipulative, controlling, people who lie, people who gaslight, difficult to spot is that oftentimes there's elements of truth to some of the things that they're saying. And this piece is what I believe is an element of truth. Now, we don't know if this is the first time, assuming that this is the reason, or something was along these lines. We're not sure if this is the first time that she said this, or maybe this is like now he found out that she actually has a plan on doing this, and maybe she didn't actually say anything at all. Maybe he discovered that she had a plan to leave. That's also something that possibly can happen. He went through her phone, or he saw an email that she was planning on leaving, or met with a divorce attorney. I think that it's highly, highly, highly likely that something like this happened, that it was discovered, it was talked about, it was said, and boom, it set him off, and he, allegedly did the things that he did. Let's continue.
During the autopsy, the pathologist stated to Detective Henry that the wounds on her hands appeared to be defensive type wounds. This was later documented in the final autopsy report, indicating defensive type wounds on her left and right hands. There were also wounds located on Rachel's right arm, which conflicted with Kyle's statement saying she had the knife only in her right hand. Per the autopsy findings, the cause of death was determined to be multiple sharp force injuries. The autopsy identifies a minimum of 17 sharp force injuries. And there was more evidence that detectives said they gathered, including interviewing Rachel's friends. One said she'd texted with Rachel just a short time before she died, and she didn't mention being angry or suicidal. In fact, the two discussed what Rachel was going to wear to a concert the next evening and how she would have to get that outfit ready. That text conversation is going to be very important to the detectives, and I'll talk about that with retired homicide detective Tom Smith in just a short bit. There was also evidence inside the home that investigators didn't feel matched Kyle Long's story. The sheriff's office enlisted the help of Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and analysts did a 360-degree scan of the home. Detectives wrote that the analysts noted evidence at the scene that would be indicative of a struggle between individuals. And the detective wrote they reviewed the layout of the residence, and it was evidence that Kyle could not be detectives. So there are red flags popping up all over the place as far as the investigators are concerned. Kyle Long was taken into custody this week and charged with murder. All right, so let's bring in retired NYPD detective Tom Smith, also the host of the Gold Shield Show on YouTube. Tom, thanks so much for coming on. I really got to get your thoughts on this one, because this reminds me of another case I covered back in Ohio a long, long time ago, where a husband calls 911 and claims his wife, died in the home, or is dying in the home. The thing that gets me about this one, you don't hear a lot about people stabbing themselves. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It can happen. But stabbing yourself in the face and neck, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow, because if you look at just patterns of happen because the pain you're in and they want it done quick. So to inflict numerous painful shots on yourself is something that isn't the norm. And in the way that, he claims she did it is definitely not typical of a attempt. And, there's a lot to this that I would like to unpack. There's a lot of questions and a lot of things I would have loved to have done and seen with running this investigation, or even being on the scene and in a room with the husband, for sure.
So, Tom, what would you have liked to have done? Because it sounds like they took Kyle down to the police station, the sheriff's office. And of course, they want to talk to him because he's the witness. He's laying out this story on 911. He's saying she stabbed herself. And so, what would you have done had this case landed in your lap?
Yeah. Well, you have to talk to him, obviously, because of just the circumstances. And, you're going to take your time doing it. You're going to be sympathetic at first because you want him to come down to a certain level. Even if you have a thought that he was responsible for this, you're going to talk to him as a surviving spouse and be sympathetic to him, but lay out all the facts that you know at that time. A case like this, there's going to be numerous factors that come out later on because of autopsies, because of crime scene analysis, because of all that. But it's important to get the initial story from him. And here's why. Because a lot of criminals, when they're setting up a crime, will have a plan with the taking care of the crime, committing the crime, but don't anticipate what happens later. And that's when you get them jammed up. And that's when you want to really go at them, because they're not thinking of the questions you're going to bring up or the evidence you're going to have. And that's when you really get them tied up. So it's really important.
I agree 100% with everything that he just said. And from my experience, what ends up happening in situations like this is that they're not really, typically when someone is guilty of something, let me rephrase. There was something else I wanted to say. I'm going to come back to that thought here in a second. Oftentimes people, when someone is, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say obviously guilty, but I'll say obviously suspicious, until the court proceedings happen. When authorities do what he says and you come across empathetic in the beginning, people on the outside looking in, it drives them up a wall. And oftentimes they'll say, especially if someone has been victimized by that person or someone similar, they'll say, they're getting over on you. They're, you're not seeing past that person's facade. They're working their charm on you, those sorts of statements. And what I would say from the professional lens is that quite often, more often than not, the professional does see it. What they do, though, is you can call it good cop, bad cop. There's a lot of different terms, a lot of different loose terms that you can call it. But getting that person to talk openly rather than trying to pull information from them and getting their statement, they're thinking of their lies and their manipulations like on a very surface level. Like I'll say, like they're not thinking like of the secondary or the third layers of questions that someone might ask, that a police officer or investigator might ask. They're only thinking of the surface level type of things, right? And so, and just like I mentioned before, in their mind, some of these stories that they've concocted make sense, especially in a situation like this where, if they do deem this to be a crime, where this is more than likely going to be a situation where it was spur of the moment, rather than something that was really thought about and laid out and planned out and those sorts of things. They're thinking about the very first layer of questions. And they're not thinking the depth of the investigation. They're also, one of the things that they're not thinking about quite often is, and I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, is that some of the things that they do actually cause and create more questions especially for someone who does this on a regular basis or is an investigator or is a therapist or a psychologist, right? It's going to create for us more questions than it does answers, especially when, initially I mentioned how in most suicidal ideations or attempts, they're not stabbings to the face and to the neck, and what it typically looks like, right? What statistics kind of lay out and what professionals typically see, right? So for you to say that this was a stabbing, we're going to have a lot of questions, right? The police are going to have a lot of questions. Okay, well, Did you see her go get the knife, right? Did you see her, when you saw her walk back with the knife, did you ask her what she was doing, right? Because that would be a very odd thing to do, to see your wife walk to the kitchen, grab a butcher knife, so to speak, and walk back to there should be like a natural curiosity, especially if there's an argument going on, right? Why did you call 911 the first time? Why did you hang up, right? Were you disconnected? Did you try to call in between in between those 4 minutes, right? The odd behavior, the abnormal behavior in any type of situation is, and should, I should say, because there are people who are bad at their job, should create way more questions than answers. And so typically people who are guilty of something aren't thinking about those second and third layers of questions where someone might end up going. And sometimes in situations where it truly is an abnormal situation, people might be able to answer those second or third layers of questions with ease, because they don't really have anything to hide. But someone who is lying about a lot of things are really going to struggle, and it's going to again create even more questions. But let's continue.
Important to talk to them quick with the information you have right away.
How important is this 911 call here to you in this investigation? There are things that really stand out to me in this 911 call, but I want to know what stands out to you in this 911 call.
Yeah, there's two things that popped up immediately. Is one, his breathing. There's tired breathing, and then there's panic breathing. Those are two different things. If you notice, his voice wasn't shaky at all. His breathing was enhanced and breathing very heavy, which tends to lead me in the direction of being tired, not being stressed out. The other thing is, you have your wife who is now bleeding profusely and maybe still alive. No thought of CPR, no thought of rendering aid to her. He mentions the fact of the knife is still in her neck, but makes no attempt to help her in that manner. So all those are bullet points I'm going to have written down when I go and talk to him, because those are the main things that stood out right away when I listened to the tapes.
And that stood out to me. The dispatcher, I mean, you could be freaking out, of course, freaking out because you just witnessed this horrific thing that you're claiming your wife did, stabbing herself in the neck and face. But then this call taker is like, okay, are you going to try to CPR? I mean, they're like, can you do this? And it doesn't sound like he made any effort to do that. And so you need to be listening to what the call taker or the dispatcher is doing. And your first instinct should be, in my opinion, and to do whatever this person is telling you to do to save your wife. There's another thing that stood out to me. He's like, my kids are going to be home in 20 minutes. So that, to me, if he is indeed guilty of this crime and it unfolded the way the police are saying, that's a red flag too, because that's showing to me that maybe this wasn't planned out. I mean, maybe this is something where she says, I want a separation. I don't want to be married to you anymore. And then he gets mad and stabs her. And then he's not thinking that, oh my God, the kids are getting off the bus in 20 minutes.
I think you're 100% right on that and nailed that really well. And I think that's what happened. The conversation took place. And when you stab someone that many times, that is a rage crime, without a doubt. In the face, in the neck, that is pure rage and hatred about what was going on. And then, like you said, I think reality kind of time stepped in and reality came back into the picture, and he thought about the kids and not wanting the kids to see that, obviously, but initially having the kids maybe question it. What did you do to mom? What happened? Anything like that is a possibility of coming out. So I think you definitely nailed that with the timing of it, with it being not planned out. I don't think it was planned at all, because most crimes that take place like this and the circumstances of it aren't planned.
So I want to piggyback off what he said, but I also want to tie that into something I mentioned about the possibility and the likelihood that there was abuse that's been happening for throughout the marriage, physical and domestic violence. And again, I'm going to give a if you are in a domestic violence situation, you need help, go down into the links in the description box down below. You can connect with a licensed therapist through BetterHelp. You can work in the comfort and convenience of your home. You'll get 15% off your first month of therapy. You can do it from home. You can do it from your office if you need to, but make sure you connect with someone. And if you do need to leave, make sure you come up with a plan of action, and not just leaving and not just saying something. These type of relationships, you need to leave carefully with a plan, and not in the typical way of having a conversation with someone the way that you would in a what I'll call a healthier divorce with someone that's a lot more mature. But getting back to what I was saying, not only did he not want the kids to see and have the kids question him, I think that it's very likely that the kids would have questioned him, because they've probably been witness, even if it was just ear witness, to his behavior towards their mom. They likely would have no doubt that it was him. Depending, I'm not sure exactly how old the kids are at the moment, but their experience, not only with him, but their experience of watching his treatment of their mother, of watching and hearing, even if they didn't watch, because in some situations kids are in a room, them hearing the arguing, them hearing things taking place, things breaking, just the chaos that goes with domestic violence. They likely would have questioned him, right? And they likely would say something. And I don't doubt. I don't know if they, again, I don't know how old they are, so I don't know if they can they'll be like on trial or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if investigators ask them questions about things that they've witnessed leading up to this. If they've witnessed arguing, things being thrown, if he's abusive towards them. So if he comes home drunk at night, and those sorts of things. So it'll be interesting. Again, I'm not sure if they'll allow for the children's statements, or if they will be on stand. They may not even need it. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm. And that raises another question to me. They always say the most dangerous time for a woman or spouse in general, I guess, is when they're trying to leave. And so we don't know what the nature of that conversation is. I'm assuming there's more detail in the actual interview of this guy, Kyle Long, more than what they detailed in the affidavit. They just said, he disclosed that she wanted a separation. So I'm sure there was more information about that in the actual interview with detectives and when that happened and everything like that. But it's like, what else was going on in the background of this relationship? She didn't just like up and say one day, like, maybe she did, but I don't think she just up and said, I want out. I mean, there had to have been something precipitating that.
Yeah, actually, definitely. And that's where the investigation comes into play. There's going to be social media dumps into both of their social media accounts. There's going to be many interviews of their friends, their family, anyone who knew them very well about what was going on behind the scenes. You can even go to the next step and interview the children about what was going on in the house. Were there fights? Were there arguments going on? Anything like that. So all that's going to culminate into the possible motive behind this. And that's what I meant before, that this investigation is going to go through different levels and different steps and be, to come up with the big picture of what happened, including the motive.
You talked about these dumps that they would do, the electronic data, so often these days, the digital data, the electronic data tells the story. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be the case in this case. And so we have basically, search warrant returns from Amazon, Apple iCloud, email accounts belonging to Kyle and Rachel. And an analyst went through everything. And it shows, this is very important, a 911 call, this is what they're saying, was placed from Kyle Long's phone prior to a second 911 call that actually connected to dispatch. This fact was inconsistent with the information provided by Kyle during the interview. At no time did Kyle disclose that he called 911 and hung up before a subsequent 911 call connected to dispatch 4 minutes later. So they're saying he dialed 911. It didn't connect. He hung up, waited 4 minutes, and then called 911 again. So something happened. Did he stop? Are they going to say he stopped and paused for 4 minutes? Is a long time, Tom. I mean, a lot of people might say, oh, that's not that long. It's a long time when somebody's laying on the floor dying.
Right. And I think, if I want to speculate on something, she wasn't dead yet. Maybe she was still moving around. Maybe he heard a breath. Maybe he heard something that startled him and said, oh, I can't do this yet, until I know she's dead. And like you said, 4 minutes is a long time in a situation like that. So I think something like that occurred. She moved. Something prompted him that he didn't have his story ready yet. He wasn't, ready to make that call yet. Something, like you said, happened. I'm going to lean towards the victim, either still breathing or moving around or something like that.
I agree with that, and I agree that that's a possibility. One of my theories, and this goes with what they discovered when they arrived there. They said that they discovered that there was paper towels laying all over the place, things like that. I think he was trying to clean it up. I think either during that 4 minutes between the 911 call, between two 911 calls, or if you remember, I was talking about the long gaps of time between when he was putting the 911 operator on hold, and wasn't really saying whether he was giving CPR, whether he was concerned with the kids coming home. His voice and the things that he was concerned about were all around keeping his innocence. Kids not knowing, wanted to make sure that his wife, wanted to make sure that the operator knew that his wife stabbed herself. And if you go back to the 911 call, he was very concerned, and I don't believe that he intentionally said this to the operator. I think he said this out loud, audibly to himself. Oh my God, there's blood everywhere, right? And so to me, and my thought is that he really wanted to clean the area up, or at least stage it enough to make it look more like a suicide. Because I don't believe this was a planned act in terms of the totality of it. I don't think that he planned on as much blood as there actually was, with a I'm going to say this loosely because he's still in court. He's still owed due process, but with a crime of this magnitude, it's going to be a mess. So he probably realized the magnitude of this and the likelihood of this not being believed, that this was a suicide attempt, and probably tried to stage it to make it look even more like that. And he probably, and rightfully so, felt over his head trying to accomplish that. Because even the story doesn't make sense, right? So you can imagine if the story doesn't even make sense, with the actual visual, with investigators coming there immediately, with your kids coming there immediately, and you're trying to preserve your innocence, the magnitude of what that looks like. So I believe, just based on what they said that they saw when they arrived with the paper towels near the toilet and those sorts of things, that I think he tried to clean it up. tried to clean it up and tried to stage it.
Or did Rachel try to call 911 from his phone and he got to her? Because there's a second part of this, and that's speculation on my part. This is purely speculation. The affidavit goes on to say, furthermore, the text message observed from her friend's phone indicates the last message between Rachel and Madison occurred 4 minutes prior to the 911 call from Kyle's phone that did not connect. So we've got like this window of time. She's texting her friend talking about the concert and getting this outfit ready. And then there's a time period, and then he called, there's a 911 call from his phone. Was there an argument? You know, did something happen? Obviously. And then there's this stabbing. And then there's another 911 call 4 minutes later. Something, I mean, we're missing some key information.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of the interview with him. You know, right off the bat, you know, he's going to claim, I was stressed out, you know, whatever, you know, excuse he comes up with. But that is definitely something to pin him on. And the calls ahead of time, you know, the text messages with her friend talking about a concert, that doesn't line up with someone, you know, who may do something to themselves, you know. So
there's a couple of things that I believe could have happened here with the text messages to her friend. It could have been him texting the friend from her phone, trying to cover all of this. Pure speculation on my end, but it's not beyond comprehension in these type of cases. It happens often where in domestic violence cases that people will, that abusers will text friends and family from a person's phone to cover, to make it seem like everything's fine. You know, the other thing that possibly, I actually think that is a really strong possibility because of the time frame that we're talking about, with 4 minutes from the time that she texts her friend. 4 minutes isn't, it's a long time in terms of like violence happening. It's not a long time to go from 0 to something like this happening. The other thing that possibly could happen, and this is another situation that's not beyond comprehension, is that they were arguing and she was also in the middle of a conversation with her friend. Now, in domestic violence situation, it's also very common for victims of domestic violence to act like nothing is happening, right? To cover for their significant other, to make it seem like everything is okay. So she's texting her friend while simultaneously in tears and in arguing, and telling her that, you know, and obviously at this point it hadn't gotten violent yet. Telling her, you know, can't wait to see you tomorrow, this and that. And the other piece to this, right? I mean, there's several theories that could happen here, but from someone who's worked with several thousands, I'll say, domestic violence victims at this point, the third thing that possibly could happen is that concert could be what led to this. As insignificant as, and I'm use that very loosely, as a concert might seem to to the general population, people who experience domestic violence will tell you, right, that something that insignificant, right, her agreeing with the friend that she's going to the concert, they were talking about what she's going to wear, right, and if she was kind of in a moment where she wants to, quote, take her power back, and no, I'm going to go to this concert regardless if you like it or not, blah, 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 right? That's something also that could, boom, escalate this situation, especially if he wasn't going, especially if he wasn't invited, especially if he knew that she was planning on leaving anyway. So those are some things. So those are some thoughts that I have in terms of these text messages and how this could have played out. And I think that last one is a really strong possibility, especially if that concert was the next night. So those are some things that when we're talking about domestic violence that are very, very common. Let's continue.
All of that, like I said, is going to create a timeline, which is going to be important in this. Timelines are very important in crimes, from the beginning of the day, and conversations that they're going to extract from their social medias, from their phones, leading up to this. That's going to be really important.
And one last thing that interests me, the return from Amazon, was that for an Alexa device, an Echo, one of those devices where you say Alexa or what have you. I know we have one of those, and I think that those can sometimes kind of collect data. And I'm just interested to know if Alexa was listening in on any of this.
Oh, no doubt. And they do that. We all have experienced that, I think. But that's when I get to the arguments and the relationship and what's taking place in that house. And that's why I said, the kids may play a part in this. The neighbors are going to play a part in this, if they heard anything going on over the days leading up to this. But that is very interesting with the return of that, because any mention towards that device is going to enact it, and it's going to start recording, and then you could get the data from that.
Most definitely. A woman is gone, and her children now are without their mother and without their father. Very sad case. Tom Smith, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's all I got for you today. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and also subscribe to my Substack, linked in the description box down below, if you want to stay up to date on this case as it moves over to trial. That being said, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next episode. You guys have a good one.